No bus. A Just Bees book club. Um, Today's book is We Want Everything by Nanni Belastrini. A 1971 novel, I believe, initially. Yes. Um, that was translated, I think, in like 2014. Yeah. Um, and then released in this edition by Verso in 2016, and this is the 2022 edition of it, I believe. This is an interesting one. I read it the better part of a month ago at this point, but I did just come back yesterday from a book club. Club, you say? Yes, a book club. A book club that includes people other than bees, unlike this one. Very strange concept. And we talked about it. And I came away from it both liking it more and having stronger critiques of it. So I'm quite excited about that. Um, We Want Everything is a novel, yeah, initially published in 71. It is basically a recitation of facts about this particular worker's life. It's all told in the I, even though there's actually extremely few first person singular pronouns. Um, Sort of the first half goes through this person's history, the fact that they were from the south of Italy and um, hate fucking work, which, hey, um, and just the ways in which they like would get a job for a couple months, like amass amount of money, go off and carouse and get drunk, and end up being another job, and how that eventually led them up to northern Italy alongside a shit ton of other people, and this is also describing the sort of the impoverization of southern Italy at the time. The industrialization of the north led to huge wage stagnation and even incredible inflation in the south, which led to a lot of people from southern Italy moving to the north. I believe the bulk of it takes place in Turin in a factory that is owned by Fiat, the car company. Um, and sort of the central thing of this novel is a week's worth of wildcat strikes that happen at the Fiat plant, and this narrator that we have, who is like a singular individual that speaks as though they could be many. I guess I should specifically say he, because there is a lot of um, there's a lot of masculine energy, sort of very extremely present throughout this book. Not pleasant, um, and so yeah, it sort of traces through this one person the way in which the industrialization of northern Italy after World War II um, has sort of impoverished the South, leading to a lot of Southern workers moving up north to take jobs, to take these extremely dangerous, extremely demanding jobs, and um, and like at the same time decently paying, because there is a bunch of um, there's a huge union presence, especially post Mussolini, that has sort of built a backbone of organizing within these factories, and that's not just in Italy, right? This is all over especially Europe, but even the United States in the 40s and 50s. Um, and then the second half of the novel is basically a recitation of the minutes of these wildcat strikes. Just like, this is what line was on strike this day. This was what line was doing a go slow this day. This is this is the I forgot what they're called exactly, but there's like the like workers who are halfway to management, the like line hands, I believe is the term used. I could be wrong about that, but like here's how they're being shitheads or refusing go slows, or just generally capitulating to management. Um, and then it ends in a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful chapter called The Insurrection, that is just roaming street fights through the streets of Turin. Again, I believe it was Turin. I'm pretty sure that's right. Where just masses of workers start fighting cops and other random, and like making barricades and throwing rocks and shit. And like other random workers and just people who live in the neighborhood join in, and they fight them till like 4 in the morning and then have to go home. And I thought it was just a beautiful, beautiful thing, that last chapter. As I sort of said in my my not bees exclusive book club, um, one of the things that's hit me really hard with this one is, like, I, in like the mid 2000s, found the films of Elio Petri, probably the most famous of which is, I think, like the seventh victim, I think, might be the title of it. But the one that like blew my fucking brain out open was The Working Class Goes to Heaven. It has some sort of like resonances with the factory scenes in Paolini's Teorema. There's a couple other things that are like itching at the back of my brain, but that I didn't look up recently enough, or I couldn't remember enough to look up. But there's a bunch of, late '60s, early '70s to late '70s Italian cinema that was like deeply influential on me, both in terms of my appreciation of aesthetic objects and in terms of my own politics. And then, discovering Silvia Federici like really, really, really bored that in for me. The Wages for Housework campaign, especially, just like reading about their demands and the like theoretical underpinnings of those demands, even at a surface level, was like, I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do this thing. This is a site of deep inspiration for me, which I think sort of Nanni himself sort of gets to mention um, in Rachel Kushner's intro. I wonder, let's see. Uh, yeah, so Rachel Kushner does the intro. Rachel Kushner, a writer I've been meaning to read, who's like, whenever I've stumbled across her stuff, I've been like, you and I seem to share a lot of interests, um, but have not gotten around to her fiction, as I'm sure I will at some point. Um, at that lunch in Rome in 2016, when we did eventually get to politics, he was serious and astute, focused on life now and life in the future, not nostalgic, even as he wasn't hesitant to discuss the past. As he later told me when I interviewed him more formally, more than being nostalgic, I consider myself lucky to have been through an extraordinary and happy period. But it would be senseless to search in that period for something anticipatory or something that could be applied politically in a radically different situation like the one we're living in 40 years later. Everything is different, everything has changed. We need new ideas, and those are always more difficult to come up with. That period bequeaths us only a stimulus, or, better, an imperative, that we need to change the world and that this is possible, necessary, and urgent. And I don't know that I've ever been able to put into words um, exactly how I feel about, both my own political actions in the past, and specifically like that milieu of, the preceding the years of lead in Italy, and parts of it. And there's other places, and not just like a weird Italophile or whatever. Although, Italo disco is also very good. Um, but there's like, yeah, I think there is something incredible to be gained by being able to conceptualize the fact that the world can be better, and that bettering is urgent and necessary, even if the specific tactics aren't the thing you draw forward every single time. Um, God, I could gush about this book in like 8 different ways. Is that true? I don't know. I just made up a number. This is just a bees book club. It's just for bees. Okay. Yeah, I feel like I want to gush more about like the specific style or the. Okay. So another thing I brought up that let's see if I unpack it more, just by dint of speaking about it in this situation. Um, it has since become clear that there is a particular person who this is based on. That um, a lot of this novel is actually more or less Nanni Belastrini talking to one person, um, and sort of taking his story and crafting it into fiction insofar as he is reorganizing it and you know picking certain things that work in the novel form. Um, uh, but I guess when Belastrini died, there had been long-standing rumors of this person named Alfonso, who was like alleged to be the voice of the narrator, the person that Belastrini interviewed, and who Belastrini would have known at the time. Um, at his at the party that accompanied his death, because apparently he hated funerals, Alfonso came out and was like, "Hi, I'm real," and that's an interesting thing because as it says in in this interview, or this as Rachel Kushner in her foreword talks about, I guess it's an introduction, not a foreword. My bad. Um, Let me see. Let me see. Yeah. Um, Nanni never answered my central question about We Want Everything regarding the life of Ooh, that was a weird one. Regarding the life of Alfonso. Now looking back, I'm not sure why this was so important to me. I think I could not fathom how it was that Nanni constructed a voice that sings with such particularity, comedy, force, and rage, and yet gives us a sense of thousands. So yeah, you sense that this is 10,000 people speaking, even though it's got such a particularity to it. Um, Nanni was also quite stubborn in his refusal to tell me about anything about Alfonso. He said, quote, "You're trying to force me to give Alfonso back his individuality. This is the opposite of what I wanted to do in the book, where he has no name. I can't do that," end quote. Um, and so there is something happening here that I haven't completely unpacked, right? That where the novel is allowing, or is giving an affordance for the universalizing of an individual experience, right? This is sort of one theory of the novel, at least, right? That it is a bourgeois tool by which we can um, sort of peer at the universal through a lens of a particular person by engaging deeply with their psychology, with their social situation, whether you're a modernist or a social realist in some sense. I was also deeply influenced by the arguments between Brecht and Bloch and Lukács and Adorno. There's a particular volume of it that I read at a particular age that shit really, really snapped my brain. Um, anyway, I've never read like Lukács's theory of the novel or anything like that, but I've read the correspondences. So one theory of the novel, right, is that like through like deep in interior a depth of interiority we can reach with a particular person. We can sort of relate to them, right? We can see what is universal in someone's particularity. And Balestrini to me seems here to be saying the to be exactly doing that, but also its opposite. It's maybe a dialectics. Who knows? Um, that he specifically took this one voice and wrote what you could publish as a memoir, and probably much more successfully publish as a memoir, although maybe not in that exact time period. It was very close, and the things described were extremely illegal, and even it's even clear from the introduction that Nanni Balestrini himself had to flee the country at some point, not too long after this. Um, but like, it's written like a memoir in a lot of ways, right? Like, there's not a ton of direct quotation of people, people who he doesn't like. He talks about a lot of people whose names he just doesn't mention. He talks so much about there's a sense of the truth of a story being told, like in retrospect to this, right? But what I say when I mean things, or what I mean when I say things like there's not a bunch of direct quotes. You don't get one of the other things I'm reading is Proust. This will come up soon. One of the big things I have about reading that book, especially the beginning of Swan's Way, is like what has in what ways is he playing with this as a memoir versus not, right? And it's like 200 or so pages in. I could run over and grab my notebook, actually. I wonder if it's actually just in here. Can I give a direct uh, quotation of fucking Swan's Way right now? Um, do, 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 do. Uh, I have very bad handwriting, it turns out. Mm-mm-mm. Okay, I think I might not have taken a specific note on this unless it's earlier than I thought. Um, right. Okay. Yeah, it is earlier than I thought. There's a line on page 80. I'm reading uh, the Moncrief, Kilmartin, and Wright. You know, this one that I the same copy I read in 2009. But on page 80, while my aunt was gossiping on in this way with Francoise, I accompanied my parents to mass, and he goes on to talk about some other stuff. But the thing he's referring to, the gossiping on, he's put in direct quotes constantly. He has like explicitly made this conversation, right? Um, in a way that's not like they may have said or I was told they talked about. It is direct quotes from characters in a situation that the narrator of In Search of Lost Time is explicitly not there for. Um, which is, I guess, one of the reasons that it's a novel, right? That you would not be able to get away with that in a memoir, or you shouldn't be able to get away with that. I'm sure it happens all of the time. Um, but I think Balestrini does sort of the opposite of this. I guess is the point I'm trying to eventually get to, which is he writes it with the rigor of someone writing something that is meant to be taken entirely as fact. He does not do. He does not elaborately draw metaphors or provide broad formal moves or do things like draw you into dialogue with characters to better understand them, um, which are all things that you are explicitly afforded by the form of the novel. This a book of fiction, as it were, a story. Uh, he doesn't, to my memory at least, he does not take any of those affordances. He, despite the fact that he calls it a novel, I think that's fucking weird. And because of that, I think the second section that is just a list of who's on strike when and where and who's not, and who's like which guards balls he kicks in, and shit like that. Um, it feels real, in a way that it wouldn't if it was the beginning of this book. I would be like, okay, so I'm reading a novel where somebody is just listing off a bunch of dates and facts about this factory. Um, but it's a novel, so it's not real. So what is the affect it's reaching towards? What are we trying to do here with this list? Because you get the first part, which is all about these adventures this person has had, and by adventures, I of course, mean mostly like the times he was at work and the times he was kicked out of work and his feelings on how bullshit work is, and the ways that like school was fucking boring and useless, but also he makes sure to note that he did it. All of these things, all these things told with the rigor of somebody writing nonfiction makes this part of it that, to me, if these two spots had been flipped, feel much more like an exercise, like a experimental exercise, right? It still does feel that way to some extent. There's the list again and again and again and again of who's on strike when and where and how. Um, it does read like some experimental fiction, but I think it is grounded in this sense of and I in the sense of that this is a simple account of a person who's speaking for many people, as as Balestrini said, or as Kushner said. Um, though, like, the other version of this, right, is the like I mentioned this on a buzz somewhere or other before, but like one of the things that was drilled into me in college courses, taking a bunch of Asian American literature classes, is like um, Maxine Hong Kingston's famous book, The Woman Warrior, the is a novel, but the subtitle is a memoir of a girlhood among ghosts. Um, because a lot of minoritized fiction gets sort of shuttled by publishers into the memoir section. If you've ever read if you've ever read The Woman Warrior and thought you were reading a memoir, you're a very strange person to me. I do not understand how you do not approach that as a novel. And I know that that book is like taught widely in like early high school courses and shit like that. Maybe you were very young when you read it or something, but like I was like 17 or something, and it was extremely obvious. I mean, the context also probably didn't hurt, but um, there is something to that. I think also the way that memoir is. I mean, memoir is and has been for I don't know at least half a century, probably significantly longer. Like the dominant form of the book in terms of sales, right? You think an Oprah's bestseller. What do you think? You think an Oprah's pick that becomes number one New York Times bestseller. What do you think? Right? It is some form of memoir or extremely autobiographical fiction, I suppose. Um, I guess after the James Fry stuff, maybe leans more autobiographical fiction because you don't have those standards of truth. Although just the American Dirt shit from like a couple of years ago, last year, whatever it was, like it's autobiographical fiction or whatever that is just racist as fuck. Anyway, all points being that I think there's something happening with form in this novel. There's a thing I have never seen before, and it's a thing I've never seen before in a field I'm very interested in, and I wouldn't say like knowledgeable about, but have explored some of, which is to say this like tension between the memoir and the novel, and what the two things allow for, both in terms of like reader expectations and formal elements, and in terms of like um, economic realities. And I've just never seen anything do it quite like this. And then it ends in that fucking kick-ass insurrection where they're just beating the shit out of cops and street fighting, and it's huge amounts of solidarity, and um, it's beautiful. And that's what I meant to end on, but I guess the thing I actually want to also say very quickly um, is the title. We want everything. This is a thread that is threaded straight through the. I feel like often when I'm talking about threads, I'm thinking of it like being woven in and out of. This is a thread that just like this is the thread that you finished the piece with and you cut, and it's all together now. We want everything comes up repeatedly. It is their demand. It is a demand that itself changes a handful of times. Sometimes it is we want everything full stop. Sometimes it is we want everything that we have produced. We want the full fruits of our labors. That sort of thing. Sometimes it is we want everything that has been denied to us. Sometimes it is we want we want everything that we want. Just throughout the book, but it keeps coming back, and comes back farther, like harder and harder, and then softer and harder again. Um, and like what a brilliant demand, what a brilliant understanding of and prefiguration of, I guess is one way to say it, but like more accurately, what a good lesson learned throughout so many movements, including ones that I've been involved in myself. Um, it's the um, occupy everything, demand nothing, right? We want everything. We don't want to. We don't want to. We don't want a bonus, but they do talk about the extremely important difference between a salary bonus versus a piecemeal bonus, the the bonus that you get if you uh, hit beyond your allotted targets in cars at Fiat. Um, and then they say like absolutely fuck getting bonuses there. We want the base salary, and they say fuck the base salary. We all want to be making the same amount. We want to push for a genuine solidarity among all workers at this factory. And eventually say fuck that. We want to fight the cops in the streets and win. Um, but that we want everything, even as it modulates. I think stands incredibly strongly as a way of saying you can't give us what we want because we want everything and we will take it together. And I think that's yeah, I think that's good politics, baby. All right, Nanni Belastrini. I want to read his other books. Seem good. Thanks for not watching.